Hello, hello creatives. Welcome to my video. My name is Gabbie, one of the glitter sisters of Optical Amoeba Jewelry. Today we're going to make a very simple yet beautiful trinket box out of a black tin box, polymer clay, and fabulous rhinestone Nirvanas, to name a few art mediums. Brought to you by tinypandora.com. You could store many small items in this box, from jewelry to keepsakes. The possibilities are endless. I hope you enjoy this video. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly review the steps of how to make this box. So step 1, silkscreen. I used an Andrew Cannon silkscreen, but you can use any silkscreen you want. However, I find that paisley designs and mandala designs work really well for this type of shading that I do with my brush and mica powder. Don't ask me why, that's just what I've discovered. Okay, so I use 2 separate sheets of unbaked white clay, and if you want, you can mix in some pearl white clay. I used Primo clay, but you could pretty much use any clay you'd like. And if you don't want to use white, I would suggest using a color that's relatively light in the value, such as yellow or any pale colors. Definitely go for pale colors like white, obviously. And that's because you want the gradients to show from black to no black, which is white in my case. And then I used black acrylic paint, which is key. And you can buy that at any craft store. And yeah, so I let that dry. And once that dries, I take my brush and I shade the silkscreened clay. So I removed the silkscreen prior to this. I shaded the silkscreen clay with carbon black Pearl X mica powder or shaved black chalk pastel, whichever you prefer or whichever is on hand. And then the next step, I cut templates for the top and bottom of the tin using a 1-inch easy cuff template for the bottom, although I'm going to be trimming a little bit off of that one since the bottom of the tin is quite a bit thinner than 1 inch. But if you can find something that's 1 inch wide or pretty much any straight edge would work, but I like these easy cuff templates because they're clear and you can see what you're doing. It's beautiful. Okay, so you cut the templates and then you apply the clay to the trinket box using liquid bakeable adhesive, and which is also called Bacon Bond, and that's by Sculpey. I don't know if other brands make any Bacon Bond or bakeable adhesive, but you can go search around. All right, and then the next step is I applied Rhinestone Nirvana Tinies. I used the clear assorted. There is another assorted variety of the Tinies. They're more AB, but I chose the clear just to take the focus out of them and create more focus on the focal element with the ruby red rhinestone Nirvana. And going back to the steps, I apply the rhinestone Nirvana Tinies with a crystal katana or the tip of a colored pencil, the kind you have to sharpen. I don't know if that's clear enough, but it's just basically a colored pencil, and make sure it's blunt on the end. And then the next step, you apply the ruby rhinestone Nirvana, and I used a 10mm chaton embedded in silver clay with silver leaf mixed in. And a helpful tip for the rhinestone Nirvanas, the clay is your canvas. You can add as many or as few as you'd like. The possibilities are endless. And that goes with a lot of art, pretty much. But this is how I did it, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, so for the first step, I silkscreened 2 sheets of white clay with a little bit of pearl white added to it, by the way, and that's optional. And you can roll it out to your desired thickness. Make sure it's conditioned very well, though. I used a thickness 4 on my Atlas machine, and I also used the Andrew Cannon Silkscreen Paisley set, and I used it for the top and bottom of the tin box. And to silkscreen, I used the black acrylic paint, and I let that acrylic paint dry completely before moving on to the next step, or else your design won't look out as nice. Okay, so the next step is shading, and I'm using a Goldilocks art brush and carbon black mica powder by Pearl X. And the Goldilocks brush, I think it's one of the baby bear or mama bears, not quite sure. But anyway, I really love these Goldilocks art brushes. They work marvelously when working on mica powder, and it doesn't even leave any brush strokes on my clay. So I applied a small amount of black mica powder to my brush. Less is more. I even tapped off the excess, and I swirled the brush around the lid, and I tapped off the excess, and then I started shading. And you'll need to repeat this step of dipping your brush into some mica powder and swirl it in the lid numerous times throughout this process. And helpful hint, take your time. I usually start with the lighter tones first and then move gradually to darker shading where you want to create depth. And I also start to shade from the darkest edge to the lightest area that I want to make it seem like it's closer, if that makes any sense. So for the places where you want darker values, you want to add slightly a bit more black mica powder to your brush, and that it helps to, create that gradient that you want for the shading. right, so now that we have finished shading your silkscreened clay, you're going to use a 1-inch wide lucite template from the Tiny Pandora Easy Cuffs kit as a guide for cutting out the template for the bottom of the trinket box. And you're going to carefully cut a 1-inch by 28.5 centimeter strip of clay that has been silkscreened with the Andrew Cannon bracelet sized silkscreen and also shaded. And also please note the template is not quite long enough to be able to wrap around your strip of clay around the trinket box. So you will have to, kind of cut a little bit past your lucite template if that's what you're using, so that you have enough clay to go all the way around your box. And also please remember to leave about 1/4 of an inch from the top of the bottom portion of your trinket box to allow the lid to fit on the box. And for the lid of the trinket box, you're going to cut an approximately 4-inch in diameter circle on a sheet of white paper, or you can also take a sheet of white paper, trace the outer rim of the lid of the box, but then you add about 1/4 of an inch of space around the circumference of the circle to allow the circle of clay that you cut out to fold over the edges of the lid. Alright, so after you've cut your clay out using your templates, you're going to apply the clay to your trinket box. So for the bottom of your trinket box, before you apply the bacon bond, you want to ensure the strip of clay fits nicely around the bottom of the box. And you want to make sure the edges line up and trim any clay as necessary using a craft knife or even your fingers, but just make it look as neat as possible. And don't worry about any smudges. You'll clean those up later with a Q-tip and acetone. And so after you've made sure all your edges line up, you're going to squeeze a small amount of liquid bakeable adhesive to the top and bottom part of the tin, and only the outer portions where you're going to see the silkscreened clay. All right, and then you're going to use your finger or a brush to spread the bakeable adhesive around the matte black surfaces. And then for the lid, you're going to score the underside of the circle cutout of clay with a dotting tool. So that circle we made, or cut out, I should say, the circle we cut out of the Andrew Cannon Paisley silkscreened design. So we're going to turn that over, score it with a dotting tool or a toothpick or any kind of sharp-ended tool you have on hand. And after you do that, you gently apply the circle cutout of clay onto your lid of clay, and you want to avoid air bubbles, as many as possible. I know they're kind of inevitable. And then you want to clean up any excess clay as necessary with a blade or your finger. And then the final step here is you're going to use acetone on a Q-tip to clean up the smudges on the white parts of the clay that you don't have shading. Okay, so after you have adhered your clay to the box, while it's still unbaked, you want to apply your Rhinestone Nirvana Tinies. And I just looked around on the design to see where I wanted to add some Rhinestone Nirvana Tinies. So I found some of these spots over here. And I indented the areas of the clay that I wanted the Rhinestone Nirvana Tinies. And after I did that, I applied a small amount of bakeable liquid adhesive polymer clay on the indented areas. And then I also applied the Rhinestone Nirvana Tinies, pressing down with a crystal katana to ensure stayability. And if you don't have a crystal katana, you could use your finger, although that may mess up your design on your clay. You could also use a toothpick, I would assume. Okay, so the next step is applying the Ruby Rhinestone Nirvana 10mm Chaton. I chose red, but you can choose any color you want. Tiny Pandora has a whole variety of Chatons and rhinestones to choose from. So I took a small piece of silver Primo clay and I conditioned it very well. And then I flattened it out to a pretty thin piece, and it's really only like the size of a quarter at this point. And I applied some silver leaf to just one side, so like the top of that silver clay. I guess you could call it a silver clay quarter. And then, so I rolled that leafed clay into a ball carefully, I made sure not to incorporate the silver leaf too much into the clay. I wanted the silver leaf to shine as the end result. So then once I rolled the clay into a ball, I pressed the clay down onto my work surface slightly to flatten it. Once I got it flattened to my liking, and also I wanted it to be big enough to encase the rhinestone inside of it to where I could also fold the edges over. And so then I applied liquid bakeable adhesive to one side of that silver piece that was just flattened out, slightly flattened out. And then I carefully pressed the 10mm chaton into the center of that silver piece of clay. And then I lightly rolled the edges of the clay over the chaton to secure and sort of encase the rhinestone in the clay. And that was the last step before baking. I baked these pieces at 270 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 minutes. But you should bake according to the manufacturer's instructions, depending on which kind of clay you use. And after your piece or pieces come out of the oven, let them cool, and you can apply any finish you'd like if desired. I would recommend applying some sort of finish because there is mica powder on the clay which can eventually rub off. There are some really good options such as Magic Gloss. Let's see. There is Deep Shine, there's UV resin, and there's also this super matte air dry finish from Tiny Pandora that works really great if you don't want a super shiny finish. And then, so after you do that, then you're free to do whatever you want with this box. And you can put trinkets in it, you can put jewelry in it, you can put whatever you want in it. And so thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share this video with your friends and family. All right, thanks.